Hi, so this is going to be a guide on how to systematically improve your aim. In my opinion, the most important aspect to training is two things. It's number one, knowing the direction and the exact steps that you're going to take to do training. I think most people simply lack this information. There's a lot of misinformation nowadays on the internet that tells you, oh, if you do this one trick or you do this one technique, your in-game aim will improve by how many. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying that even if you do it and your in-game aim, let's say improve by 10%, what are you going to do from there on out? You have no idea. People lack a sense of direction and a sense of progression, and that's what I aim to instill in you with this video. And the second is self-validation and hope, because I think the number one issue to commitment to a routine is despair. It's people's lack of self-confidence in that it's working, because a lot of times you have to grind it out. There's sometimes we're gonna run into problems and you don't see any solution immediately, but if you can see yourself constantly improving and see a clear roadmap ahead of you, that of which many people have tread and have reached success, then you will feel much more confident going down this road. So I can break aim progression down into three general areas of improvement. So number one would be raw mouse control. This is your ability and comfort in manipulating the mouse. So for example, like, can you move your mouse at a certain speed very smoothly? Can you move your cursor to where you want to be looking at very easily? Just stuff like that. That's number one. Number two would be specialization in specific scenarios. This often involves technique. So for different games, this can be different. For example, for Apex in the finals, the gunfights are longer, so tracking and evasive targets is much more important. For COD, maybe switching is more important because CDK is much faster. For like cs2 and valorant, like static and dynamic clicking is much more important because that first shot accuracy to the head is very, very important. So you can apply different techniques and refine your techniques once you have built a level of fundamental competencies in raw mouse control. And third would be translation to in-game. So for example, aim trainers can only help you read the target so much. Yes, you can read change in velocity when targets like goes from moving left to moving right, the target slows down. That aim trainers will help you train that, but the in-game model oftentimes has a lot of in-game cues that you can take to know which direction they're about to go, so you can lead your shots. So that would be translation in real game. So I think a lot of people are missing a crucial understanding to this last part, and that's why they're not like being able to translate what they're doing in aim trainers into the real game, and they think it's useless. So to put into perspective, imagine your main game is soccer, right? So playing aim trainers and improving your raw aim is like running on a treadmill and doing dexterity exercises. It'll make you stronger, faster. It will make you, for example, you have more endurance. You have better control over your legs. And specialization would be, for example, training passes, training goal kicks, training half-court shots, stuff like that. Basically stuff that improves, like actions that you will do in game, stuff like techniques that will improve, be able to be translated closely directly to in-game, and actually playing the game or doing in-game training would essentially look like, for example, spotting openings by enemy players when you can pass to a teammate, stuff like that you can only get by playing against real opponents. So there's people that say you can just skip everything and just play the game. Yes, you can just skip everything and just go play soccer every day. More talented players will just get better naturally over time, but that doesn't mean that they don't benefit from like running on a treadmill or training your dexterity. Like more endurance, more strength, more speed, more dexterity is always going to be good for you. And especially for the rest of us that are not really gifted, we need to train in areas that we can confidently progress in to be able to match the natural talent of these players. So first, let's talk about raw mouse control. So to develop raw mouse control, you can do this in aim trainers most efficiently. You can use aim labs or Kovacs. I use both. I gravitate towards Kovacs these days. So if you haven't heard before, there's something called Voltaic, and there's a Voltaic benchmark set. Voltaic is like a aiming group or whatever, and their benchmarks essentially covers all the main skills, which is tracking, switching, and clicking. Tracking, switching, and clicking are the three major categories and major skill sets that contributes to aim as a whole. And in each section, for example, they section off into smaller sections. So for tracking, you have precise, reactive, control. Switching, you have speed, evasive, stability. Clicking, you have static, linear, and dynamic. So these are essentially breaking the aim as a big thing into major categories, and then breaking major categories into specific skill sets that are distinct from one another, so that you can train every single one and essentially eventually be able to combine them to improve your raw mouse control. I won't go over how to get Voltaic or play Voltaic in this video. In short, you go to the website, you go to benchmarks, you scroll down, and then you can see their playlist. You can click on it, it will load up the playlist for you in Kovacs. And for scoring, you can either use their website or you can use the spreadsheet I'll provide below. It's season 5, so it's out of date because season 6 that moved to their website, but it's very laggy for me, so I use the spreadsheet myself. You just put your score in, it tells you what your rank is. There will be another video in the description that tells you how to get started on Voltaic. So you will see 3 different playlists. You have novice, intermediate, and advanced. Don't be concerned with advanced. We're not going to be playing advanced. Start with novice, and once you reach gold on every single benchmark, you can move on to intermediate, which are the harder versions of the scenarios you will see in novice. So to progress through the benchmarks, you have to progress through these scenarios in a very specific order. That's because some scenarios are more fundamental than others. You have to have certain skills to be able to move on and do later scenarios. So on screen, this is a screenshot straight ripped from Corporate Serfs video. He's an amazing guy, and the link to the video will be in the description. I highly recommend you go watch this whole thing, because my summary here would be pretty brief. So the idea is that, for example, you cannot do switching without having tracking skills, because what tracking is very fundamental mouse control. It's the ability to, 1, move your mouse smoothly at a set speed that you want to, and number 2, to be able to slightly read the targets. And if you don't have these 2 skills down, you basically cannot really do anything else, because the later skills will require you to at least be able to control your mouse. Right, so switching is just flicking to new targets and then tracking them afterwards. If you can't track, then you can't do switching, because switching has tracking in it. And let's say clicking, right? Let's pick dynamic clicking, for example, passive. You have to do switching, you have to flick between targets. You have to incorporate certain aspects of static, where you have to do pathing, like reading ahead of the targets. And then you have to do a bit of tracking, because you have to track the targets a little bit. And then you have to do clicking, which is basically making sure you're actually on target before you shoot, because sometimes you lead your shot and you wait for the target to walk into your crosshair in passive scenarios. So it will combine everything together. So the later scenarios essentially build on top of the skills you have used before. If you haven't had a good foundational mastery of the skills on the top, you can't do the bottoms effectively, and it'll be a total waste of time. That's how people get bottlenecked. So what Surf believes in is that basically you get precise, right, to silver, and only then do you move on to control. You can control the silver, and then you move on to reactive. You don't move on to reactive unless control is in silver. So what I do personally is I would say it's better to go rank by rank, because especially for less talented players, sometimes, for example, silver to platinum can be quite the reach, and I would get precise, for example, from silver to gold. I wouldn't reach all the way to platinum. I'll get precise to silver to gold, and I'll get control to gold, and I'll get reactive to gold, and then I'll get the rest of the playlist to gold complete, and then I'll move on. I'll get precise to plat, control to plat, reactive to plat, and I'll move on to the playlist. That is what I would do, and what I would suggest for a more casual audience. I think that works, at least it works for me. And if you play around an hour to an hour and a half per day, personally, I would hard grind a scenario for about 20 minutes or so. So on average, I play about 2 to 3 scenarios. So for example, then I'll play precise, the first 2 precise, and then I'll play the first control. So let's say scenario 1, 2, 3. And let's say I get scenario 2 to gold, then I'll play 1, 3, 4. But I never ever skip over this one scenario until I get this to gold as well. Then I can play like 3, 4, 5. Right? But if this never ends up being gold, I can progress with the rest of the scenarios. But then I will still do this every single day. So this will be 1 out of my 3 scenarios I grind every single day until this eventually becomes the rank I want it to be. If you ever get stuck at one scenario for a long time, I think it's important to go and look for additional resources like techniques and supplementary scenarios or playlists you can play to improve this weakness. Because if you're getting stuck on one scenario, then clearly you have a weakness that you're not, like something you're not understanding conceptually. Then you need to find additional practice to supplement this weakness. Generally speaking, you want to play benchmarks until you get to masters, because once you get to masters, you have pretty much full mastery over your mouse control, and there's not much point to go on beyond that and play like advanced scenarios and try to, unless you're an aim trainer main. Otherwise there's no real point, in my opinion, if you want to just get good at games, because then your mouse control is at a point where you can begin specializing in specific scenarios that will help you more in game. So you could start considering this at diamond or even as low as platinum as well if you are really stuck and looking for a quick sort of boost to your gameplay. So with good mouse control, you should start feeling more comfortable and consistent with your shots and mouse movements in game. You should already be able to see some improvement from, like, for example, gold to diamond, diamond to masters. But I would say that specialization will really start bringing your gameplay to the next level. So what specialization is essentially playing scenarios that closely mirrors scenarios in game. So for example, for Valorant, you want to play dynamic clicking scenarios, maybe like 1 wall 5 target passive, but 50% smaller, horizontal only. Let's say something like that. Or maybe floating heads, 50% smaller, horizontal only, something like that. Because for example, there's less vertical movement in Valorant as a whole, so training a lot of vertical flicks is not going to be as helpful. You can spend that time into training horizontal instead. You'll be doing dynamic clicking because it's very important to have good click timings to get the first insta headshot on the guy, versus if you're playing Apex, like I said earlier, you want to do more tracking and evasive targets because that's more relevant in that game. So by funneling your energy into specific games after you have gained good mouse control, is you're going to start developing specific skills, techniques, and target pattern recognition reading skills that will start helping you in game directly. With good mouse control, you will feel more confident and consistent with your shots and performance as a whole. And the mouse, like, you won't have a situation where you're like, oh, I wanted to move my mouse here, but my hand couldn't do it. You won't really have that much feeling or shakiness as much anymore. But with practice using like specialized in-game scenarios, you should start seeing a big improvement in your in-game performance, because you're practicing things that are basically happening in-game. That is why for aim labs, for a long time, I've recommended grinding the yay scenario, because that is basically the targets move at the same speed as heads do in game, and they're about the same size as heads do in game in Valorant. That's why it was so effective for me. But do understand that a lot of guides, even my previous ones, kind of go into specialization too early. It's too ambitious. For talented players, you could probably pull it off, yeah, if you're natural aimers. But for especially noobs, like, you want to start building up basic mouse control before you go into specialization. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult for you to move forward. Or you have critical weaknesses in certain areas that you don't know how to fix later on. So beyond that, remember, these two are kind of one after the other, but the third component to aim progression in general should be developed in parallel to your mouse control. Third component matters more, like, it's more based on the specific game you play. So you see, we're getting from general mouse control to specific scenarios close to in-game, and then to actually playing the game and getting into those specific scenarios. So in-game, the character models are going to have different tells. So the biggest issue people have is on, like, for example, strafing targets, getting the timings down, or on evasive targets and not knowing, like, not being able to react quick enough when they do change directions. While yes, aim trainers can help you. For example, you can see that, oh, the target is slowing down. That means he's probably going to start standing still and shooting, or he's going to start strafing the other way. In game, there's a lot of tells that can tell you. For example, in Apex, when someone strafes, like, changes direction, their whole shoulder sways, and you can start reacting and moving your mouse the second you see one of their shoulders start swaying the other direction, instead of waiting until you see their whole body move that way. For Valorant, if you move to the side, because people only swing with A or D, the legs like face a specific direction, and the whole lower torso and the hips are twisted towards that direction. And when they stand still and look at you, their legs are always facing towards you, and their hips is facing towards you. And when they strafe the other way, their legs and hips will start swinging the other way. So you can tell when someone is about to stop moving and then change direction and 80-80 right, like just go back into that strafe, just by observing the way the player model is. So you want to go in the game and familiarize yourself with the actual gameplay and being able to apply the techniques and the mouse control you have developed before with the information that is given to you in game, and be comfortable hitting shots in game. So to wrap the video up, I'll be giving you some of the most basic techniques to get you started. So for tracking, I have linked a video made by Struth Gaming about using your eyes efficiently while tracking. So every single one of us can track. If you look at something, for example, a car running on the street, you can track with your fingers while looking at the car, right? That's what tracking is. There is something primal within us that allows us to do tracking just naturally. You just have to be able to channel it and have enough practice to be able to do it with a mouse in the in-game scenario, basically. The idea is to hyper focus on the target. So how I found to qualify this is essentially you will get to a point, normally when you look at the screen, right, you'll be like the target is moving against the background. You should be able to get to a point at some point where it looks like that the background is moving against the target while the target is sitting almost still. Then you know you have done it right when that happens. But you shouldn't over focus on the target to the point where you will lose your crosshair, because it's still important to put a small piece of your brain to know whether your crosshair is ahead or behind the target. This way you can use your fingertips to micro adjust to catch up to the target if you're slow, or to slow down to the target if you're too fast. But being able to really focus on a target, it really does just help with your natural tracking abilities, especially when you're starting off. For static clicking, it would have to be Bardoz's method. Bardoz is like the original goat of Kovacs, and this is a method that everybody needs to use, and most people already do. So essentially, when you see a target, you make a large initial flick to get close to the target, and then you make a smaller secondary micro adjustment once you're near the target to get on the target, and then you pause for a second to confirm that you're actually on target, and then you shoot. So this is a pretty rudimentary method. Snowi's method essentially varies this a little bit by making the initial flick slow down towards the end of the first flick, and making this way it makes it so that it's much more rare to over adjust to target, basically meaning flicking over the target and then having to micro adjust backwards. Anyhow, the other thing for trainers you need to know is pathing. So what pathing is that once you acquire some level of basic competency, while you're flicking to the first target, in your mind you should have a roadmap of where you're going to go next. So for example, you play one wall 5 target, you should be able to chain a couple of close targets together to form a line, sort of. So you go to this number 1 target, you're already scouting the map and looking for the second, third, and fourth target. So this way, after you finish clicking on the first target, you don't waste any time. You go immediately to the second target, and then third and fourth. It's very similar to drawing a line with pauses and clicks. So last but not least, we have to talk about moving and evasive targets. Evasive targets are always hard to aim, just because naturally we have a reaction time, and that means that we're always going to be lagging behind someone else's, for the most part, almost instantaneous change in velocity. So to combat this, there is 2 things I want to talk about. So number 1, for example, take Valorant as an example. Gunfights in Valorant are not actually very dynamic. They usually happen the same way. I have compiled something like 30 different fights, and I've realized that most fights, straight on 1v1, right? So we both see each other at the same time. Most fights, the enemies stops moving at around 230 to 280 milliseconds after they see me initially. This means that with this information, this means that I should be able to know generally how far they can swing within this certain amount of time, because you can only go so fast, and people only swing with AOD in Valorant, so it's very predictable where their head is going to be after a certain amount of time if you've played the game a lot. And also, this tells me when I should stop like moving to stop setting off their aim, and when I should start aiming. Because if I start aiming kind of as they slow down, as they reach this 230 280 millisecond window where they stop moving, so as their velocity decreases as they get to this window, I'm basically aiming on a much slower moving target and almost a still target sometimes, which makes my life a lot easier to either place my, like, lead my shot, right, place my crosshair before them and wait for them walk in and click timing them, or to do my final corrections to flick onto them. The other thing, especially for evasive targets, is most games will have very clear tells. Like, most people's movements are clearly telegraphed through different aspects of the game. So for example, for CS or Valorant and such, you can generally tell when they're going to start slowing down. Your eyes easily pick up the like, it's not a conscious thing, but subconsciously your brain should be able to tell when the enemy's starting to slow down. And when they do slow down, the only thing that can mean is that they're gonna stop and shoot at you, or they're gonna strafe in the other direction. So you should be able to prepare for that once you recognize that, oh, they're slowing down now. This kind of ties into the first point as well. And the other thing is, most player models do give very obvious telegraphs. Basically in Apex, for example, when you change directions, your shoulders sway from one side to the other very dramatically. If you spot that their shoulders start swaying, you can start moving your mouse in the opposite direction far before their player model actually completely runs on the other side. This results in an almost perfect track if you can get the pattern and timing right. Yeah, that's pretty much everything. So I don't claim to make anything new. There's nothing new here. And honestly, I'm pretty awful at describing and explaining things. So I highly recommend just going to the actual source material, which will all be in the description and I think in the pinned comments, and looking at the actually talented people who came up with this stuff. They explain it a lot better than I do. This is just a compilation of all the things that I think is helpful for someone starting out or someone who's stuck or bottlenecked, which I can say is a lot of players. Players these days, they don't have a sense of direction, I feel like, and there's too much random misinformation on the internet from people who don't know what they're talking about, misleading players. So at the end of the day, less yapping, more training, believe in yourself, believe in the method. Tons of people have tread this exact path and they have made it. You will make it too, even if you don't see a lot of improvement right away.